and it really wants a deal that will guarantee an end to the war. But if it doesn't accept this proposal, then Israel will probably escalate the war. So we're really not clear now what the next step will be.
Well, joining me now live is Dan Arbel. He served in the Israeli Foreign Service for some 25 years. He's also a scholar at the Center for Israeli Studies at American University here in Washington. Dan, great to have you on. How do you view this response from Hamas? Not necessarily a no, it's not a yes either. There's so many details really being worked out between the two sides. Is Hamas, do you think, simply holding out for a deal on its terms?
Yeah, certainly I think that the exchange that we've seen in the last 24 hours is a preliminary stage to the real negotiations that will take place in the coming days. Israel agreed to the U.S. framework. Hamas has kind of took parts of it, but then added more really inconceivable demands like a 7-year stop to the war or full Israeli withdrawal, which are not realistic at this point in time. So I think Hamas just kind of laid out kind of a starting position, but I don't think these are his final positions. And I think this, however, does not shut the door to continue negotiations, but we're not there yet. And it will take a few more days, at least, until we can actually reach understandings and agreements on all elements of the next phase of a deal.
You know, as part of your former remit, you would work on negotiations on the Israeli side. How do you think Israel sees these talks right now? It's obviously under a lot of pressure internationally to try to reach a ceasefire deal to improve the conditions inside of Gaza. Does it seem to you right now that it's really kind of pressing the advantage that it thinks it has over Hamas?
Yeah, I think that, we're seeing Israel, work in two tracks. One is that we see the military track advancing. Israel is intensifying its attacks on Gaza, trying to bring Hamas, to convince Hamas to agree to compromises. At the same time, Israel is engaged in diplomacy. And so it's working both sides of that issue. And also for Israel, it's important to have the U.S. on its side. And the fact that Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, came out and said that this is an unacceptable proposal by Hamas actually gives Israel the backing that it needs, internationally and regionally in terms of continuing with its stance. But certainly there's a lot of pressure that's been built up on Netanyahu and his government, and he understands that he needs to move forward. But the proposal that Hamas put on the table makes it easier for him to stall for a bit. But at a certain point, he'll have to compromise on certain aspects of the deal.
Meanwhile, and this is kind of news that we've been getting in drips and drops, and today the IDF confirming publicly that it had killed, it believes, Hamas leader Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of Yahya Sinwar. To what extent do you think that might affect these negotiations in terms of Hamas leadership? Do we know right now who's actually making the decisions?
So certainly Mohammed Sinwar was the leader of Hamas in Gaza after his brother was killed earlier, several months ago. And but he was considered someone who was against a hostage release for ceasefire deal. He was really extreme in his positions. The fact that he's been eliminated, he's no longer there, that gives hope that Hamas will be more flexible. But certainly at this point in time, Hamas leaders that are abroad, mostly in Qatar and Turkey, are the ones calling the shots and not the Hamas leadership inside Gaza. So we're hoping that this would be the elimination of Mohammed Sinwar will allow more flexibility and more allow progress in negotiations.
Difficult to say, perhaps, but how do you think those Hamas leaders that are outside of Gaza see these negotiations? Because, Hamas is under pressure as well. We've seen some actual protests within the Gaza Strip against Hamas leadership in recent days and weeks. So are they isolated so they don't feel that? Or do you think that they feel just as much pressure to reach a deal as the Israeli side might?
I think that they're very well attuned to what's going on the ground in Gaza, and they are in contact with those in charge in Gaza. But I think that they're also under pressure from Qatar, from Egypt. They do sense that, Trump has, the fact that Trump has reached out to them in the previous round, releasing a Israeli-American hostage just a month ago, and just opening the door for U.S. contacts with Hamas, gave them also some encouragement. And I think that they want to be seen internationally as a player and as somebody that is recognized by other very important actors on the international stage. So I think that they are equally as worried, and they are keen on reaching a deal. I think pretty soon, and that's why I think they're feeling the pressure. They're not isolated. They'd like things to move forward in more quickly.
Yeah, and of course, given the humanitarian situation there in Gaza, many people obviously hoping
Absolutely.
for a deal. Dan Arbel, thank you very much, scholar at the
Thank
Center
you.
for Israeli Studies at American University.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Thanks.
Well, Iran has called a new report on the country's uranium enrichment politically motivated and baseless. The UN's nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, finds that Iran has significantly increased production of highly enriched uranium, which is used in the production of nuclear weapons. It says Iran now has enough material, if further refined, to produce about 10 nuclear weapons. Iran insists its program is peaceful. It says it would implement appropriate measures in response to any action against Iran by the UN monitor. Meanwhile, U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff has sent what the White House calls a detailed and acceptable proposal to Iran for a nuclear deal. Washington saying on Saturday it's in Iran's best interest to accept it. All right, well, let's get more now. We can bring in Holly Dagres, senior fellow at the Washington Institute Viterbi program on Iran and U.S. policy. Great to have you here. What did you make of that report from the UN's nuclear watchdog? What do you think this tells us about Iran's current capabilities when it comes to a potential nuclear weapon?
Well, I think the timing is definitely interesting. The same day that a U.S. proposal is handed to the Iranians via Oman, you have these two very significant reports that the IAEA has revealed. The first report, of course, was that nuclear material was found in these undeclared sites that were tied to what was then considered a nuclear weapons program in the early 2000s. Problematic, but not entirely new information. But what's more significant is the second report, which you noted that Iran has actually